I never thought my own son would look at me like that. Not with anger, not even with hate, but with cold inconvenience, like I was some old piece of furniture taking up space in his life. My name is Margaret Lewis, and I am 72 years old. For 40 years, this house was my world. I remember the smell of fresh paint when we first moved in. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding baby Daniel in my arms, whispering promises to him while his tiny fingers wrapped around mine. "I'll always protect you," I used to say. "I'll never let anything happen to you." I kept that promise. I worked double shifts after his father passed away, skipped meals so Daniel could have new shoes, sold my wedding ring to pay for his college books. And I never once complained, because that's what mothers do. That morning, I was making tea when I heard his footsteps, fast, heavy, impatient, the sound of someone who had already made up his mind. "Mom," he said, standing in the doorway. "We need to talk," I smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." "Sit. I'll pour you some tea." He didn't sit. He didn't even look at the table where he learned to do homework, or the wall where his childhood height marks were still carved. Instead, he dropped an envelope onto the counter. White, thick, official. "What's this?" I asked, my hand suddenly shaking. "It's legal paperwork," he said flatly. "I've talked to a lawyer." I laughed nervously. "A lawyer? Daniel, what are you talking about?" That's when he finally looked at me, not at his mother, at a problem. "You can't live here anymore." The words didn't register at first. What?" I whispered. "The house is in my name now," he continued. "You signed it over years ago, remember? For tax reasons." My heart began to pound. "I did that for you," I said, "so you'd be secure. And now I need my space," he snapped. "Linda's uncomfortable with you here." Linda, his wife. The same woman who never looked me in the eye. The same woman who called me dramatic when I cried in pain at night. "So, where will I go?" I asked quietly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "That's not my problem anymore." Something inside me cracked. "I raised you," I said, my voice breaking. "I gave you everything I had." He turned away. "I didn't ask for that." The kettle screamed behind me, boiling dry. I realized then. The boy I raised was gone, and standing in front of me was a stranger holding eviction papers in his hand, ready to throw his own mother out of the only home she'd ever known. And as I stared at that envelope, my whole world began to fall apart. I left the house with one suitcase. That was all Daniel allowed me to take. Not the photo albums, not my late husband's coat, not even the old clock that still chimed every hour like a heartbeat. "Just the essentials," he said, avoiding my eyes. I stood on the porch for a moment, gripping the handle of my suitcase so tightly my fingers went numb. The front door, the same door I painted blue when Daniel was 10, closed behind me with a sound that echoed straight into my chest. Click. Just like that, I was homeless. It was raining. Not the dramatic kind you see in movies, just a cold, steady drizzle that soaked into my coat and made my bones ache. I waited. I don't know what for. Maybe for Daniel to open the door again. Maybe for him to call my name and say, "Mom, I'm sorry." This is a mistake. But the door never opened. A neighbor across the street peeked through her curtains, then quickly looked away. No one came out. No one asked if I was okay. I walked. Each step felt heavier than the last. My knees trembled, my breath came short, and with every passing house, memories flooded in. Birthday parties, Christmas lights, children laughing. I wondered when I had become invisible. That night, I slept on a bench at the bus stop. I pulled my coat tight around me, clutching my purse like it was the last piece of my life I had left. Cars passed by, headlights blinding, engines roaring, yet I had never felt so silent, so alone. Amal. I didn't cry at first. Shock has a way of numbing pain. But when the night grew colder and my back began to ache, the tears came quietly. The kind that slip down your face without a sound, because you don't even have the strength to sob. I did my best. I whispered into the dark. I really did. The next few days blurred together. I went to a small shelter run by a church. The volunteer at the desk looked at me with pity as she handed me a thin blanket and a plastic cup of soup. "Any family we can call?" she asked gently. I shook my head. My son was no longer my son. At night, I lay on a narrow cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to strangers cough, cry, and pray in their sleep. I kept replaying Daniel's words in my head. That's not my problem anymore. I stopped eating much. Food tasted like dust. My body felt tired, but my mind refused to rest. Every corner of that shelter reminded me of what I had lost. My kitchen, my garden, my warm bed. Sometimes I caught myself setting aside bread rolls in my pocket, just in case tomorrow was worse. One afternoon, I tried calling Daniel, just once. The phone rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "Daniel," I said softly, my voice shaking. "It's me, your mother. I just wanted to hear your voice." I paused, swallowing my pride. "I don't need anything. I hope you're well." The line went dead. He never called back. That was the moment I realized something far more painful than eviction. I hadn't just lost my home. I had lost my place in my son's heart. I began to question everything. Did I love him too much? Did I raise him wrong? Was I foolish to believe kindness would be returned? Every night I prayed, not for revenge, not for money, but for peace, and for strength to survive the loneliness that felt heavier than hunger. Little did I know that while I was sleeping on a stranger's cot, something from my past was quietly waiting to change everything. It happened on a Tuesday morning, nothing special about it. No thunder, no warning, just a knock at the shelter office door. I was folding donated clothes when a young volunteer stepped inside, holding a clipboard and a phone. "Mrs. Lewis?" she asked. I flinched at the sound of my name. No one had called me that in weeks. "Yes, that's me." "There's a call for you," she said, her brow furrowed. "He says it's urgent. Urgent." Urgent, my heart skipped. For a brief, foolish second, I thought of Daniel. I wiped my hands on my sweater and took the phone. "Hello, Margaret Lewis?" A man's calm voice replied. "This is Thomas Green, attorney at law. I've been trying to reach you." I nearly dropped the phone. "A lawyer?" I whispered. "I think you have the wrong person." "No, ma'am," he said gently. "I represent the estate of Robert Lewis, my husband's name." My knees weakened, and I sat down hard on the nearest chair. "Robert passed away 14 years ago," I said. "Yes," the lawyer replied. "And his estate has just completed a long-delayed audit." I closed my eyes as memories rushed back. Robert's laugh. His careful handwriting, the way he always said, "I'll take care of you, Maggie." "There's something you need to know," Mr. Green continued. "There's something you need to know," Mr. Green continued. "Your husband left behind a sealed letter and a supplemental will. It was never activated." My breath caught. "Why not?" I asked. "Because," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "it required a specific condition." I leaned forward. "What condition?" "Proof that you were no longer living in the family home by your son's decision." The room went silent. "What?" I breathed. "The document was designed to protect you in case you were ever abandoned," he explained. "Your husband anticipated this possibility." I felt a strange mix of pain and comfort. Robert knew. Somehow, he knew. Mr. Green continued, "Inside the letter is also information about a private investment account your husband kept hidden under your name. It has grown significantly over the years." "How much?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, "it's worth just over $2 million. The world seemed to tilt. I pressed a hand to my chest. "I don't understand," I whispered. "I've been counting coins for soup." "I know," he replied softly, "and I'm very sorry you had to go through that." He paused. "There's more." Of course there was. "Your son has no legal claim to this account or the property anymore. The moment he evicted you, the final clause of the will was triggered." Tears streamed down my face, not from joy, not yet, but from something deeper, validation. "I'd like to meet with you in person, Mr. Frist," Green said, "to explain everything and to help you decide your next steps." I hung up the phone slowly. My hands were shaking. For weeks, I had believed I was nothing, a burden, a forgotten woman. But my husband had left me a final act of love, a shield. That night, lying on my narrow cot, I held my purse to my chest and whispered into the darkness, "You kept your promise, Robert." And somewhere deep inside me, for the first time since the door closed behind me, I felt hope. I stood in front of the courthouse doors with my hands folded neatly in front of me. For the first time in weeks, I was wearing clean clothes that actually fit. Not borrowed, not donated, mine. Mr. Green walked beside me, calm and steady, his briefcase tucked under his arm. "You don't have to say a word today," he reminded me gently. "Let the documents speak for you." I nodded. I had said enough words in my lifetime. Loved enough. Begged enough. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat with Linda a few rows ahead of us. He looked confident, relaxed. He didn't see me at first, and when he did, his smile vanished. "Mom," he whispered, standing up halfway. "What are you doing here?" I met his eyes. "I came to listen," I said quietly. The judge entered, and the room settled into silence. Mr. Stossaway. Green presented the documents slowly, carefully, like laying down pieces of a puzzle that had been waiting years to be completed. The supplemental will, the sealed letter, the clause activated by my eviction. Daniel's lawyer flipped through the pages, his face growing pale. That can't be right," Daniel muttered. "She signed the house over to me." "Yes," Mr. Green replied evenly, "for tax purposes only. Ownership was conditional." The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at Daniel. "You evicted your mother," she said. "In doing so, you voided your claim." Linda grabbed Daniel's arm. "Say something," she hissed. But he couldn't. The truth had no room for excuses. Then the judge asked if I wished to read the letter. My hands trembled as I stood. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting familiar. "My dearest Maggie, if you are reading this, it means our son has forgotten what love looks like. I am sorry you had to be hurt to learn the truth." My voice broke. This home was never meant to cage you, and my savings were never meant to reward cruelty. I looked up. Daniel was crying now. "You are free," the letter ended. "Choose peace." The judge ruled swiftly. The house was returned to me. Daniel was ordered to vacate within 30 days. Gasps filled the room. Outside, Daniel approached me, his eyes red, his voice shaking. "I didn't think you'd actually have nowhere to go," he said. I didn't know about the will. I looked at him, not with anger but with clarity. "I know," I said. "And that's the saddest part." I walked away, not in triumph, in peace, because justice isn't about revenge. Sometimes it's about finally choosing yourself. But heartbreak doesn't end here. I used to believe that if you loved your child enough, they would never abandon you. That love was a kind of insurance. A promise life couldn't break. I was wrong. My name is Helen Carter, and I am 68 years old. For most of my life, it was just me and my son Brian. His father left before Brian could even walk. No goodbye, no child support, no apologies, so I became everything. I worked mornings at a grocery store and nights cleaning offices. I learned how to fix leaky taps, check homework, and hide my exhaustion behind a smile. Every night, I sat on the edge of Brian's bed and brushed his hair back gently. "I'm here," I'd whisper. Always. When he graduated college, I cried harder than anyone. When he got his first job, I framed the offer letter. When he married, I gave him the savings I had quietly built over 20 years. "Start your life strong," I told him. "I'll be fine." And for a while, I was, until my body began to fail me. The first fall happened in the bathroom. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was how it ended. Brian rushed me to the hospital that night. He held my hand. He even cried. "I won't let anything happen to you, Mom," he said. I believed him. A month later, he brought me to a large building with pale walls and the smell of disinfectant. "A nursing home?" I asked, confused. "Just temporary," he replied quickly, "until you're stronger." I packed a small bag, just in case. As he signed papers at the front desk, I watched his pen move faster than his heart. That night, when visiting hours ended, he kissed my forehead. "I'll be back soon," he said. He never was. Days passed, then weeks. I watched other families come and go. Children laughing, grandchildren hugging frail arms. My bed stayed empty of visitors. One afternoon, I asked the nurse, "Has my son called?" She checked the file, then looked at me with gentle sadness. "No, Mrs. Person. Carter." That was the moment the truth settled in my chest like a stone. I wasn't forgotten. Time moves differently in a nursing home. Days don't pass, they repeat. Every morning, the same pale light slipped through the curtains. The same pills placed in the same small paper cup. The same question asked in the same careful voice. "Did you sleep well, Mrs. Carter?" I always nodded, even when I hadn't slept at all. My body healed slowly, but my heart didn't heal at all. I waited for Brian. At first, I made excuses for him. He must be busy. Traffic is bad. He'll come on the weekend. I told the nurses not to worry. I told the other residents my son worked long hours. I lied for him. Every afternoon, I dressed as if he were coming. I brushed my hair, put on a little lipstick, sat near the window where I could see the parking lot. Car after car arrived. None of them were his. After the first month, I stopped asking the nurses to check the phone log. Their eyes always told me the answer before their mouths did. At night, the loneliness grew louder. The woman in the bed next to mine cried for her daughter every evening. The man down the hall shouted names from his past, trapped in memories that refused to let him go. And me? I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Brian's childhood like a broken film. His first steps, his first broken heart, the way he used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. How did we get here? I whispered into the dark. Some days, he didn't even cross my mind. Those were the worst days. Because forgetting him meant losing the last piece of myself that still felt like a mother. My savings ran out faster than I expected. The nurse explained the costs carefully, kindly. I nodded again. I sold my wedding ring to cover one more month, then my necklace. Then the small gold bracelet Brian gave me when he was 16. I didn't tell him. I didn't want to sound like a burden. One afternoon, I finally called him. My hands shook as I held the phone. It rang, then went to voicemail. I tried again the next day, and the next. On the fourth call, he answered. "What?" he said, irritated. "It's me," I said softly. "I just wanted to hear your voice." There was a pause. "I'm in a meeting, Mom." "I know, I rushed. I won't take long. I can't do this right now," he snapped. "You're safe. You're taken care of. What more do you want?" The line went dead. I stared at the phone long after the call ended. That night, I didn't cry. I felt something worse. Empty. I stopped going to the common room, stopped joining activities, stopped correcting people when they forgot my name. I began to feel like a file number, a responsibility passed on. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was his problem, one he'd already solved. And deep down, something told me this wasn't just neglect. There was something else, something hidden, something that would eventually surface, whether my son was ready for it or not. The discovery didn't come with drama. No shouting, no sudden miracle. It came quietly, the way truth often does. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Mr. Alvarez, a volunteer legal advisor, came to the nursing home. Once a month, he helped residents review paperwork, insurance forms, power of attorney documents, wills. I almost didn't go. "What's the point?" I muttered to myself, but the nurse insisted. "Just listen," she said gently. "It can't hurt." I sat across from him at a small table in the activity room. He smiled kindly and adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "do you have any family handling your finances?" "My son?" I replied automatically. "Brian." "Do you have copies of the documents you signed?" he asked. I shook my head. He said he'd take care of everything. "Mr. Saub." Alvarez nodded slowly. "I hear that phrase a lot." He pulled up some public records on his laptop and asked for Brian's full name. As his fingers moved across the keyboard, his expression changed, just slightly. "Mrs. Carter," he said carefully, "did you know your house was sold 6 months ago?" The room spun. "Sold?" I whispered. "That's not possible. I was still living there then." He turned the screen toward me. There it was, my address, a sale date. Brian's signature, right where mine should have been. He used a durable power of attorney, Mr. Alvarez explained. "You granted it to him years ago. I remembered signing something at the kitchen table after my fall." Brian had said, "It's just in case, Mom." My chest tightened. "He transferred the funds into a private account," Mr. Alvarez continued. "One that pays directly for your nursing care and stops the moment you pass away." I understood then. He hadn't abandoned me because he was overwhelmed. He had planned this. He had turned my entire life into a temporary expense. I pressed my hand to my mouth as tears spilled over. "I trusted him," I whispered. "I know," Mr. Alvarez said softly, "but trust doesn't erase the law." He leaned closer. "There's something else." I looked up. The power of attorney was valid for daily decisions, he said, but not for selling property without your explicit approval. My heart skipped. What does that mean? It means, he said firmly, that sale can be challenged. For the first time in months, something stirred inside me. Not anger, strength. What do I need to do? I asked. Mr. Bed belied Zed. Alvarez smiled gently. Just tell the truth. That night, I didn't lie awake, replaying Brian's childhood. I replayed my own. The years I worked, the sacrifices I made, the life I built with my own hands. And for the first time since I'd been placed in that home, I didn't feel powerless. Because the truth was no longer buried, and soon my son would have to face it. The day of the confrontation felt surreal. I had dressed carefully, just a simple blouse and skirt, nothing fancy. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like the woman who had spent her life quietly building everything, only to be discarded, yet still standing. Brian didn't recognize me at first. He walked into the conference room with his usual arrogance, expecting me to be meek, silent, grateful. The moment his eyes fell on me, I saw that flicker of unease. He knew something had changed. Alvarez laid out the documents in front of us. The sale papers, the private account statements, the clauses that Brian thought he had manipulated. Brian's lawyer shuffled nervously, realizing the house, the funds, everything could legally be reversed. Brian swallowed hard. This can't be true, he said, his voice shaking. I leaned forward, feeling a calm I hadn't known in months. It is true, Brian, I said softly, each word deliberate. You chose to ignore your mother. You chose to abandon me. And in doing so, you triggered the very protections I never imagined I'd have to use. He looked down at the table, unable to meet my eyes. I remembered all the nights I stayed awake while he slept, worrying about him, all the birthdays, all the tears, all the love poured into a child who now looked at me with regret instead of respect. The legal documents were clear. Ownership of my home reverted to me. The private account, once invisible to him, was mine entirely. Brian opened his mouth, but no words came. Linda squeezed his arm, whispering frantically, but it was too late. The law and my husband's foresight was already on my side. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about property. It was about dignity. About the years of love, sacrifice, and devotion that should never be taken for granted. I looked at Brian one last time. I raised you, Brian, I said, my voice trembling. I gave you everything I had. And now, I have only one thing left to give you, a lesson. Kindness cannot be bought or stolen. It must be earned. He didn't speak. Tears ran down his face, silent and heavy with guilt. I stood, gathered my purse, walked out of that room not in triumph, but in peace, because for the first time since my heart had been broken, I felt free. Free from anger, free from betrayal, free to live the rest of my life with the knowledge that I had been seen, that I had been heard, and that justice, slow and patient, had finally arrived. Outside, the sunlight hit my face. It warmed me in a way that months of cold hallways, loneliness, and sorrow had not. And for the first time in a long while, I whispered to myself, I am still Helen Carter. I am still here. And I am enough. When family turns away, who will stand by you? I never imagined I would feel invisible in my own life. My name is Rose Mitchell, and I am 74 years old. For decades, I poured every ounce of love I had into my sons, Ethan and Caleb. I stayed up late nursing fevers. I baked birthdays, cakes no one ever thanked me for. I whispered encouragements into ears that barely listened. And yet, here I was, standing in the cold drizzle outside my own home, suitcase in hand, realizing the bitter truth. Love, no matter how deep, does not guarantee gratitude. It started with the phone call. Mom, Ethan said, his voice sharp and distant. I need you to leave the house by next week. Leave? What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. You know I've lived here my whole life. It's our house now, Caleb interrupted. We don't want complications. Linda's family is coming over. You can't stay. I stared at the receiver, numb. I had given them everything. Years of care, of patience, of sacrifice. And now, in the span of a few sentences, I had become a problem. I tried to reason. Please, just give me more time, but they had already made their decision. I was being cast aside, like an old coat no longer in fashion. I packed a small bag that evening, taking only what I thought I could carry: photographs of my grandchildren, the letters my late husband had written me, a few changes of clothes, everything else, the memories embedded in walls, the furniture polished by decades of my hands, would remain behind, now claimed by the sons who had forgotten the woman who raised them. I stepped outside. The rain soaked my coat and ran down my face, mixing with tears I barely knew I was crying. I walked without direction, feeling every footstep as if it were a betrayal. Neighbors peeked through curtains, avoiding eye contact. No one asked if I needed help. No one offered comfort. That night, I found myself on a park bench, curled up under my thin coat, shivering from cold and heartbreak. "I did everything for you," I whispered to the dark. "My life was yours." And yet, the darkness only swallowed my words. I realized something terrifying. I was alone. Completely, painfully, utterly alone. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it truly meant to have no one to turn to, not even your own family. The first few nights were the hardest. I slept on that park bench, wrapping my thin coat tightly around me, clutching the small bag that held what little remained of my life. The cold seeped into my bones, the dampness into my soul. Every car that passed made me flinch. Every footstep in the distance made me think someone was coming to chase me away. But no one did. I wandered through streets I used to know as a child, streets that had once felt safe and alive. Now they were empty, indifferent. I begged for shelter at a few small motels. They looked at me with suspicion. No rooms, they said, even though I could see vacancies. Some nights, I went without food. Some nights, I cried silently under streetlights. I started talking to the pigeons, whispering my fears and memories. "Don't leave me," I told them. At least they listened. I thought of calling my sons. Just once, I dialed Ethan's number. It rang and rang, no answer. Then I tried Caleb. Same result. I realized then the truth. It wasn't just rejection. It wasn't a temporary misunderstanding. They didn't want me. I felt every corner of my life collapsing. The home I had built, the meals I had cooked, the birthdays I had planned, they didn't matter anymore. And yet, I survived. Not with comfort, not with kindness, with sheer stubbornness. With a stubborn heartbeat that refused to stop, even when everything else in me wanted to. One day, while walking near the edge of the city, rain washing my hair and face, I tripped over a small stone. I fell hard, scraping my hands, and cursed under my breath. A young man appeared beside me almost immediately. "Are you okay, ma'am?" he asked. His face was open, concerned, and something in his tone reminded me of family. Not my family, but maybe the family I had always longed for, the one that didn't abandon me. He helped me to my feet, offered me a jacket to cover my soaked coat, even bought me a sandwich and a bottle of water from a nearby shop. I wanted to say no. I wanted to push him away, but I didn't. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that sometimes help comes from strangers, that sometimes the world isn't completely cruel. And somewhere deep inside, I sensed that my story wasn't finished yet. That maybe the twist that would change everything was quietly waiting to appear. It was a rainy Thursday when the real twist began. I had been surviving on small kindnesses, soup from a shelter, a hot coffee from a cafe, and the occasional help from that young man who had saved me from the puddles days earlier. His name was Ethan. Funny, the same name as my son. He had offered to let me stay in a small spare room at his apartment until I could get back on my feet. I was hesitant at first. I was a proud woman. But hunger, cold, and exhaustion make humility unavoidable. That evening, as I rested in the modest room, Ethan handed me a small envelope. "I found this in the mail for you," he said. "Thought you should see it before it gets lost." Inside, I found papers I hadn't seen in years, legal documents, letters, even what looked like bank statements. My hands shook as I examined them. It was a private investment account, one I had never touched, one my sons never knew about. A savings my late husband and I had quietly built, meant to secure my future. I stared at the numbers. It was more money than I had ever imagined. Enough to live comfortably, travel, and even help others. I looked at Ethan, disbelief written across my face. You helped me. Why? I asked softly. He smiled gently. Because you were left behind, he said. No one should be abandoned like that, and someone has to care. I realized then that my sons, the ones who had pushed me out of my own home, had no claim to this money. Every cruel act they had done only reinforced the protections my husband and I had put in place. It was as if fate itself had intervened, rewarding patience, kindness, and endurance. For the first time since being cast out, I felt control returning to my hands. Not through revenge, not through anger, but through truth. The young man had saved me from the streets. The hidden documents saved me from my sons. And in that quiet apartment, with rain tapping softly on the window, I realized something vital. Sometimes, family isn't just blood. Sometimes, family is the person who shows up when everyone else turns away. And in that moment, I knew that my story, the one I thought had ended on a park bench, was about to take a dramatic, unexpected turn. The morning of the confrontation felt surreal. I had spent the night going over every document Ethan and I had found. The hidden account, the letters, the clauses my sons thought they could manipulate. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready to reclaim my life, my dignity, and the home that had once been mine. Ethan drove me to the law office. He didn't speak much, just offered quiet support, a hand on my shoulder, a reassuring glance. Sometimes I realized that's all it takes, a steady presence when the world has abandoned you. When Brian and Caleb arrived, they were confident, smug even. They expected me to be frail, silent, compliant. They hadn't counted on the woman they had cast out, rising with a quiet authority that couldn't be ignored. The lawyer laid out the documents with precision. Every sale Brian had orchestrated, every attempt to touch the private account, every clause that had been triggered the moment I was evicted. Brian's face went pale. Mom, you can't. I held up a hand. Brian, Caleb, you did not raise me. You abandoned me, and the law, my husband's foresight, protects me now. Ethan handed me the papers I needed to sign. It was simple. One signature to reclaim what was rightfully mine. I looked at my sons, the faces of entitlement, greed, and guilt staring back at me. I didn't do this to punish you, I said quietly. I did this to remind you that love cannot be forced and respect cannot be stolen. I survived without you. I will now live with the people who choose to stand by me. Brian dropped his head. Caleb's hand covered his mouth. For the first time they realized the magnitude of their mistake. The lawyer confirmed. The house, the account, and all remaining assets were fully mine. They had no legal claim, no authority, no power. I stepped outside afterward, breathing in the crisp air. For weeks, I had walked in shadows, hidden, ignored, abandoned. Now I walked in light. Ethan stayed by my side. I'll help you settle back in, he said. I smiled, a smile I hadn't felt in months. You already did, I replied. You showed me that kindness still exists in this world. And as I walked past my reclaimed home, past the front garden I had planted years ago, past the walls that had held laughter and tears, I whispered softly to myself, I am still Rose Mitchell. I am still here, and I am stronger than those who thought they could erase me. For the first time since being evicted, I felt safe, valued, and truly at home, not because of my sons, but because of the truth, and the stranger who had become family when I had none. Betrayal leads to unexpected justice. I never imagined my own son could be so cold. My name is Dorothy Allen, and I am 70 years old. I spent my entire life working, quietly, patiently, endlessly, for my family. I raised my son, Peter, on my own after my husband passed. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every late-night illness, I was there. I sacrificed. I saved. I dreamed of a day when Peter would look at me with gratitude instead of entitlement. And yet, that day never came. It started with small comments. Mom, why do you still live in this old house? You're embarrassing me. Can't you just go stay with Aunt Louise? I laughed it off. I told myself he was tired, stressed, busy with his life. But then the threats began. You need to move, Peter said. One morning, standing in my kitchen. I want the house for myself, and Linda says it's time. I froze. The house. My home, the walls that held 40 years of my life. I built this house with my hands, I whispered. You're not just taking a house, you're taking my life. Peter's face hardened. This isn't up for discussion, he said. You have 30 days, that's it." And just like that, the woman who had nurtured him, fed him, and worked herself to the bone for his comfort became a tenant in her own home. I packed a few personal belongings, photos, a blanket, the jewelry my husband had left me, the rest. Everything else, he claimed. I felt my heart break in ways I had never known. I walked through my garden one last time, the roses I had planted, the tree my husband and I had nurtured together. Every petal whispered memories, every branch a reminder of life I had lived, and as I stepped outside with a small suitcase in my hands, I realized something terrifying. I had nothing left, not even the son I had raised. And in that emptiness, a small seed of resolve began to grow. Because even in heartbreak, I sensed justice had a way of catching up. The first night outside my own home was unbearable. I sat on the cold front steps, my hands clutching a thin blanket and a small bag of belongings. The walls that had once echoed with laughter, with family meals, with the rhythm of my life, now loomed silently behind me, empty and unwelcoming. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to convince myself that this was temporary, but deep down I knew this wasn't just about a house. This was about betrayal, the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any physical wound. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Some pretended not to see me. Others whispered behind their hands. No one came to help. No one cared. I walked the streets at night, shivering in my coat, searching for warmth, for some sign of kindness, for anything familiar. I passed by my favorite cafe, my husband's old office building, the park where Peter had played as a child. Everything I had built, everything I had loved, had been claimed by my own son. The loneliness was suffocating. Some nights, I stayed awake, staring at the stars, and whispered to the heavens, "Why, Peter? Why would you do this to me?" The answer never came. I tried to eat, but food felt tasteless. I tried to sleep, but my mind replayed the years of sacrifice, every sleepless night, every cold winter morning spent working for his future. And I cried, not out loud, too proud for that, but silently, tears tracing lines down my cheeks, mixing with the rain when it fell. One day, a letter arrived at a neighbor's house. They handed it to me cautiously, almost afraid of what it contained. It was from a lawyer I didn't recognize. I didn't open it immediately. My hands shook too much. That night, I finally dared. The letter spoke of a will, a hidden clause, and assets my son had no right to claim. My heart raced. Could it be true? Had my husband years ago anticipated a moment like this? For the first time since Peter's betrayal, a flicker of hope appeared, not the kind that promises instant relief, but the kind that whispers, "Perhaps justice isn't done yet, and your story is not over." I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered into the darkness, "Maybe I will not leave empty-handed. Maybe karma has a way of balancing even the cruelest hearts." The next morning I returned to the neighbor's porch, clutching the letter as if it were a lifeline. I reread every word, slowly, carefully, as though the meaning might change if I read it too fast. It spoke of a hidden trust set up by my late husband decades ago. A trust that would remain dormant unless certain conditions were met, conditions he clearly anticipated might one day arise. One of those conditions, it said, was abandonment by my child. If I were forced out of the home I had built, the house would revert to me in full ownership. Any attempts by the child to claim my savings or sell property without my explicit consent would trigger automatic legal protection. I stared at the numbers listed in the statement enclosed with the letter. My husband had quietly saved a small fortune, enough to secure my comfort for the rest of my life. Over the years, interest and investments had multiplied it far beyond what I had ever imagined. Peter had no claim to this money, no legal right, nothing. A strange mixture of relief and vindication surged through me. The betrayal had been real, the heartbreak had been deep, but now, justice was quietly waiting to act. I felt a surge of determination. This was no longer just about survival. This was about reclaiming what was mine. I contacted the lawyer listed in the letter. His voice was calm but kind when he answered. "Yes, Mrs. Allen," he said. "We've been waiting for the right moment to act. Your son's actions triggered every protection your husband put in place. You have full legal authority to reclaim your home, your assets, and your dignity." I hung up the phone slowly, my hands trembling. For the first time since Peter had evicted me, I felt powerful. Not vengeful, not angry, just empowered. All the years of love, sacrifice, and betrayal had led to this moment. And now, the cruel son, who had thought he could claim everything, would face consequences he could not escape. I whispered into the quiet house that now felt like it was waiting for me again. "Thank you, Harold. You always knew how to protect me, even from the ones I loved the most." Somewhere deep in my chest, I felt the first real warmth in months. The seed of revenge, calm, deliberate, and just, had taken root. The day I returned to the house was surreal. I had walked past it countless times since Peter evicted me, each glance piercing my heart like a knife. Now, armed with the documents, the trust, and the authority my husband had left me, I felt something entirely new: control. Peter and his wife Linda were waiting inside, confident, smug, assuming I would crumble under confrontation. I opened the front door slowly. "Mother," Peter said, his voice cracking slightly as he saw me standing there. I stepped inside, holding the envelope with the trust documents. "I am here," I said quietly, calmly, "and I am taking back what was always mine." Peter's face paled as I laid the documents on the table. "Mom, This can't be," he stammered. "It is true," I said firmly. "Your eviction triggered every clause my husband anticipated. The house, the assets, everything you thought you could claim, now fully protected under the law for me, not you." Linda reached for his arm. "We can figure this out," she said weakly. "There is nothing to figure out," I replied. "You ignored me. You abandoned me, and now you face the consequences of your actions." I watched as Peter's confidence crumbled. The arrogance that had allowed him to evict his own mother evaporated. He looked at me now, not with contempt, but with regret. You can't do this," he whispered. "I can," I said, my voice steady, my heart calm. "I survived your betrayal. I survived the eviction. Now I live with the truth and the law on my side." "You survive your mistakes." The lawyer confirmed everything. Every transaction Peter attempted to manipulate was reversed. The house, the investments, the savings, they were all mine. I didn't shout, I didn't gloat. I simply stood in the home I had built, looked around at the walls that had held my life, and felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. For the first time since Peter turned his back on me, I realized justice isn't always about revenge. It's about reclaiming what's rightfully yours. It's about being seen and respected, even when others try to erase you. Peter and Linda left quietly. No excuses, no apologies that mattered. The house was mine again, and so was my life. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, the walls, the familiar spaces, and whispered softly, "I am Dorothy Allen. I am strong. I am home." And for the first time in a long time, the betrayal felt like a distant memory, one that no longer had the power to define me. Some endings are just beginnings in disguise. I never thought I would feel so small in the world I helped create. My name is Margaret Thompson, and I am 75 years old. I raised my daughter, Clara, alone after her father left us. I worked nights and weekends, stitched her clothes, baked her favorite cakes, and whispered prayers over her dreams. I believed that love could protect her from everything, but one day that belief shattered. It started with a call from Clara's husband, Mrs. the official that first cried out, intoxified. "Thompson," he said, voice clipped and impatient. "We've decided that your presence in Clara's life is complicated. She doesn't need you around right now." I felt the phone slip from my trembling hands. I raised her," I whispered. "She's my daughter. I love her." "There's nothing you can do," he said coldly, and hung up. I tried calling Clara herself. She didn't answer. She didn't call back. Weeks passed in silence. I walked the streets near my home, clutching a small bag of belongings, feeling every footstep as if it were a reminder of my own helplessness. Neighbors looked away. The world had gone quiet. I was alone. At night, I cried quietly in my small apartment. I missed the warmth of hugs, the sound of her laughter, the way she used to curl into my arms as a child. I wondered if I had failed, if all those sacrifices meant nothing. And yet, deep in my heart, I held on to one fragile hope, that love, even when rejected, sometimes finds a way back. Little did I know, someone was about to change everything. The weeks that followed felt endless. I woke up each morning to silence. No calls, no knocks, no laughter, Just the ticking of the old clock on the wall, reminding me that life was still moving, but I wasn't part of it anymore. I tried to occupy my days. I walked through the park where Clara had once run with her friends. I visited the local library and sat for hours reading, but even the words on the pages felt hollow. Every story reminded me of what I had lost. The warmth of my daughter's smile, the sound of her voice saying, "I love you, Mom." I tried reaching out to Clara again, but each call went unanswered. I left messages. I even sent letters. Nothing. Some nights, I curled into my armchair, hugging a blanket as if it could hold me together. I whispered to the darkness, "Maybe she'll remember me, maybe she'll come back." But the days stretched into weeks. And slowly, I began to feel invisible. Unseen, forgotten. Food tasted bland. The television's chatter felt distant. Even my memories seemed heavy, weighed down by loneliness. Yet in that despair, I noticed small signs of kindness from strangers. A neighbor brought me a loaf of bread without asking. The grocer offered a discount on milk, smiling softly. Even the mail carrier greeted me with warmth, unaware of my heartbreak. Those small gestures reminded me that not all hope was lost, that love doesn't always disappear. It just sometimes comes from unexpected places. And deep in my heart, a quiet voice whispered, "Hold on, something is coming. Something will remind her why she is loved." Little did I know that hope wasn't just a whisper. It was the beginning of the most heartwarming chapter of my life. It happened on a quiet Saturday afternoon. I had been sitting by my window staring at the garden I had once tended with Clara as a little girl when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I wasn't expecting kindness. I wasn't expecting the world to notice me. But there she was, a young woman holding a small package and a hesitant smile. "Mrs. Thompson?" she asked softly. "I'm Emily, Clara's friend from college. She wanted me to deliver this to you." I took the package, my hands trembling. Inside was a letter and a small photo album. The letter was written in Clara's hand. "Mom, I've been so wrong. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I let my husband and fear cloud my judgment. I've missed you every day. Please forgive me. I want to see you. I need to see you." Tears streamed down my face as I opened the photo album. Pictures of Clara as a child, birthdays, school plays, moments I thought were lost forever. And tucked between the pages was a small envelope. Inside was a plane ticket. "To wherever you are, Mom. I'll meet you there." My heart pounded. I could barely breathe. The woman who had felt invisible, abandoned, and unwanted was about to be reunited with the daughter she had loved, unconditionally. I held the letter to my chest and whispered through tears, "Clara, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped believing." In that quiet living room, with sunlight streaming through the window, I realized something magical. Sometimes, love doesn't just survive betrayal. Sometimes it comes back stronger. And sometimes, the family you thought had left you finds its way home again. The airport was bustling, but all I could see was her. Clara. My daughter. My little girl, grown up and standing there with tears in her eyes, waiting for me. I set my suitcase down and ran. I ran like I used to run after her in the park when she was 5, when the world seemed endless and full of possibility. And then finally we collided in a tight embrace. "Mom," she cried, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I missed you so much." "I missed you too," I whispered, holding her face in my hands. "My darling, I never stopped loving you." We held each other for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. All the months of heartbreak, loneliness, and pain melted away in that hug. We walked slowly toward the car, hands entwined. The world around us faded. Nothing else mattered. When we finally sat together, tears still falling, she looked at me and said, "I want you to move back in with me. I want you to be part of my life again, every day, not just in memories." I smiled through my tears. "I would like that," I said softly. "And this time, nothing will tear us apart." For the first time in months, I felt truly whole. Love had returned, not as an abstract hope, but as a living, breathing, tangible reality. The betrayal, the abandonment, the months of struggle, they had all led to this. A reunion, a second chance, and a bond stronger than ever before. As we drove home together, hand in hand, I looked out the window and whispered to myself, "Family is not just blood. Family is love, forgiveness, and finding each other again." no matter how long it takes. And in that moment, my heart, once broken and weary, felt complete. Love, forgiveness, and family always find a way. Stories like these remind us of one powerful truth. Karma never forgets, and kindness is always rewarded. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video. Comment below which story shocked you the most, and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories where justice always finds a way.